Welcome back to the Chicken Coop Studio. In today's video, we're going to be checking out Art Spectrum's Colourfix primer. Pastel paper is it's sort of like sandpaper that you would get at the hardware store. It has a very fine tooth to it. It's not very aggressive. You're not going to use it to sand down your latest wood project, but it does have a tooth to it that works great when you're using soft pastel. And Colourfix paper is a 140-pound watercolor paper that has been silk screened with this product right here. And this primer is something that you can brush onto any surface and prime it for pastel. It's giving it some of that tooth that the sanded pastel papers come with. This primer really opens up the possibilities because you can underpaint using a variety of different medias and techniques, paint this over the top, and you have that beautiful sanded pastel surface to work on. This pastel painting on this side is painted on a regular piece of Colourfix sanded pastel paper. I worked with watercolor and gouache and developed an underpainting, and then as soon as it was dry, it was ready to accept the soft pastel. On this side, we have the small pastel painting that I worked with the Colourfix primer. Now, cold press is the variety of watercolor paper that has a little more texture to it, a little bit more surface to it. And when I was working on this watercolor paper, it had a little bit more texture to it, so it was a little rougher. And that's one thing that I did notice is that as I get close, I can see that there is a lot of that texture coming through. This is the tone of the pastel paper. And for working with pastels, I think working on a toned paper has a lot of advantages to it. In this case, a lot of that tone is coming through in the final piece. You're going to see me working in watercolor and gouache on both of these small paintings. I worked them side by side. I worked them at the same time. And it was a really good experiment. I found the Fabriano 140-pound paper to be pretty good watercolor paper. It did kind of make the paper a little bit wavier, but the Colourfix paper, on the other hand, is just, it laid down perfectly and it's completely flat. So for me and my purposes, I know that I like using pastel on a toned ground. The Colourfix paper is going to accept watercolor and gouache, all the medias that I enjoy underpainting with. And when I do underpaint with watercolor or gouache, it doesn't take away any of the tooth. It leaves the surface intact. It's not like when you watercolor on top of the Colourfix paper that any of that tooth is going to be dissolved or scrubbed out or anything like that. It really holds up. I've actually heard of people who have made a painting on the Colourfix paper that they didn't like, and they just scrubbed it out under the kitchen sink, laid it out to dry, and it was ready to go and ready to be reused. To me, that shows that this is a really great piece of pastel paper. I do think that it was a really good trial to try out the primer. I think next time that I try it, I'll try it on some Arches 300-pound pastel paper, which will help with any of the little warping and buckling. And there's not a ton. I don't know if you can see. Between each coat of this took at least 10 minutes to dry. So while the Colourfix paper was dry from my watercolor painting within 10 minutes, I had to make this watercolor painting, wait 10 minutes for that to dry, put a coat of the Art Spectrum primer onto it, let that dry for another 10 minutes, and then give it another coat. So there's a lot of downtime in using the Colourfix primer. It's just something that you should know. It does take a little bit more time if you are working with the pastel primer. To recap, Colourfix paper, toned ground, love the surface, quick and immediate to work with. In terms of technique, everything works fine. Really robust paper. Fabriano 140-pound with the Colourfix primer on it. You get a lot of texture, a lot of added texture from the watercolor paper. Could be cool. You might not like that. You might like that. Just depends on what you're trying to do. I like both of them. I think I'll keep using the Colourfix primer. I know I'll keep using the Colourfix paper. And I also think that I might try it on a sheet of Masonite. You know, maybe I'll do a underpainting or something like that on a sheet of Masonite, go over the top with the Art Spectrum primer and see where that takes me. I really like working pastel with a underpainting. Seems like a lot of that when you do use the Colourfix medium gets ghosted and softened behind the layers of pastel. So that's a great technique to use. Build up on top of a ghosted surface. Here's the cows done on Colourfix paper, framed up. A lot of warm tones in that one. And here's the cow that I painted on the Fabriano watercolor paper using the Colourfix Prime. Thanks so much for sticking with me. Thanks for checking back in. Let's do this again soon. Let's get out and paint. From the Chicken Coop studio, I appreciate you guys checking in. I appreciate you guys listening to my talk about pastels and pastel papers. No, guys, really, thanks for checking this video out. We'll see you guys soon. All right, talk to you later.